Right? Got it?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. And we are joined by Troy Moten. Troy was a student activist. He's now a local businessman based in Maryland, right, Troy?
Right.
Yes, and he still is like our friend, like our previous guest Solomon Kamajan, unapologetically outspoken. Troy was actually a student of Solomon, the editor of Your World News, and was a contributor to Your World News, sometimes a co-host to some of the programs on Your World News, and yeah, and we're going to, and he's our guest today. I'm honored that he's our guest. So Troy, welcome to One Plus One.
Hey, thank you much.
And Troy, before I get to these questions, is there anything in that very brief biography I gave of yours that you would like to contribute? Like what, like what, what did you graduate with? What were you studying at the university you're at, and how did you come to know our previous guest Solomon Kamajan, and what is the business that you're and that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so my name is Troy Moten, originally from New York, and came down to the University of Maryland in Prince George's County, Maryland, and graduated with a degree in public health in 2009.
Cool.
There I met Solomon at the Black Male Initiative program that he co-founded back in my sophomore year. So there I learned a lot about Black history and just how powerful we are as a people. So real interested in Black empowerment, real interested in health, and real interested in wealth. Those are the three topics that I talk about pretty much all the time. Not interested too much about much else. So I'm just excited to be on with you and flesh out some of those issues. And my business is helping people make money through energy and telecom. So we help people make money, we help people save money, and help boost some of that side income, and help people run home businesses on the side of their side job or other income streams. So it's been a pleasure doing that and really getting into the wealth building and closing some of these poverty and wealth gap issues.
And this may sound like a stupid question, but I have to ask: why do you think it's so important to do the work you're doing when it comes to I assume local Black communities, like in Maryland, which Baltimore, for example, has a very huge Black population. Of course, New York has it has a Black community, it has a Latino community, it has sort of melting pot communities. So why, with the business that you're doing, which is helping people, invest in this, save up on that, let us help you with that. Why do you feel that is so important, to do that?
Well, I want us to number one, survive, and mostly thrive and prosper, and realize that the lack of health and then the lack of wealth I see are the two biggest problems in the Black community. And if I don't do anything about it, I can't look to outsiders to do much about it. We have to save ourselves. We have to look out for our own interests, because other people are not. We have found that out over, decades and centuries of waiting. So figured out someone's got to do it, so it might as well be me. And find like-minded individuals who are on that path, and learn from our forefathers and people who've been there, done that. So I see it as not only my desire but my obligation. Make the world a better place, make the community a better place, and it is just a lot of opportunity to do so. There's a lot of hurt and struggle out here, but there's a lot of solutions that we can implement it. So we got to not just complain about it and talk about it, but actually do what needs to be done to solve the problems. And there are many ways to do that. And so we got to get to work, and I'm just doing my part and looking to do more.
Fantastic. And make sure to send, and then, once the interview is done, I put this on YouTube, make sure to send me the link to your business in case people are interested, especially if they migrate or emigrate to Maryland in the future. And first question I wanted, then the first question I wanted to ask you is, we were talking a bit off the air about, the ongoing coronavirus crisis and how it's become a very polarizing subject for whatever reason. But that aside, how is the community you're based in Maryland? How is it coping with the corona virus, and what are some of the stories you're hearing back where you're originally from in New York on how the response to coronavirus is? Is it yeah?
Well, I think it's affected everybody in a myriad of ways. I don't think there's any person in this country, if not any person on this planet, who's not been affected in some way, whether it's affecting their health, whether it's affecting their money, whether it's affecting their ability to meet and see their family, their health issues. Ever since we got locked down here in Maryland in March, where the school that I work for, because I also work a job on the side of the business, the school that I work for was shut down. So that was something that I had to deal with, initially being told not to come to work, and then they pay, and then they're like, no, we're not paying you anymore. So that was something
Oh, wow.
I had to adapt and find out the unemployment route, and figure out how to navigate and adapt with a quickness. And some people did not adapt so well, and really the state of Maryland unemployment system let a lot of people down, where people called hours and hours and just no answer and no callback, no response. So a lot of people out here are struggling. Fortunately, like I said, I have a side business, so that definitely I was able to help. I knew that plan B was going to have to come into play one day. So that's why I always tell people it's unwise to just rely on one stream of income. You got to have multiple streams of income, because you never know when one is going to falter, to whether it's the job's fault, whether it's the boss's fault, whether it's the government's fault, whether it's the market's fault. You got to have a backup plan, a plan B, a side gig, call it a side hustle, call it what you want. You need to have multiple streams of income. So the income was affected, and then I just made sure I boosted my health. I like studying health in my spare time, and I just turned my research all the way up and learned all about this coronavirus, and
Yeah.
looked at what the origins possibly were, looked at what the doctors are doing, looked at what the government is saying, looked what the government is not saying, looked at all the different theories, all the different conspiracies. It's just so very interesting what's happening, and all the different responses, and all the different fear tactics, and the 24/7 fear propaganda that's going on, and just trying to distinguish fact from fiction. So I think I'm a pretty good judge of information, and been able to figure out what's real and what's fake. And so just boost my vitamin and mineral intake, and start eating healthier, and get my health right, so I can handle everything else.
What you were saying before about helping out, the Black community, the local Black community, and others, who are part of the community, it kind of reminded me of a saying of Ralph Nader, and a book that he did called "Breaking Through Power." It's easier than you think. And speaking about coronavirus, and the fact that you like reading about health, and how to respond to different health scares. What are public health officials really saying about coronavirus? And because there are some people who say that hospital masks are very ineffective. You have others who are very on both the left and the right, who are saying that lockdowns are counterproductive. So if you were a public health official, or you were the attorney general, and you could get in a room with with all these people, and all what is the science saying on how to respond to coronavirus, apart from it would be wonderful if the US had a single payer healthcare system that way, but that's a different issue altogether. But what is the science really saying on how to respond to COVID-19?
Well, it all depends on who you believe, because you can find any set of doctors, scientists, health experts, independent researchers that agree with your stance. There's people who think that masks and social distancing are the answer. There's people think that vaccines are the answer. And then there's people that think that all of that is absolutely useless and even dangerous. And I'm actually of the latter, that this is more.
That's what?
I'm actually more toward the latter, that masks and lockdowns and vaccines are not the preferred answer. That this is something that
Okay.
you can actually solve more with by boosting your immune system and taking the proper vitamins and adequate dosages of vitamins and minerals, with vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, and quercetin to be specific. See, I've looked at tons of research that talks about this is a respiratory virus, mostly a respiratory transfer of the virus, and there's a lot of studies out there if you know where to look, because there's a lot of corruption here in the American media that really stifles any information on natural health and the power of foods and supplementation and vitamins. And unfortunately, it's not making mainstream news. You know, Dr. Fauci is on this TV 7.
And do you say that because you find too much people think that the lab that coming up with some kind of a vaccine is the end all be all? And certainly if there was a magic vaccine, I would welcome it with open arms. But that should not be the sole answer. It also should just be basic things like what you were saying. Make sure you have the right vitamins in your system and so forth, right?
Well, unfortunately, this medical system is rife with corruption. Whether you talk about the CDC, whether you're talking about the FDA, the USDA, you're talking about decades of corruption and uneasy relationships between the pharmaceutical industry and the food industry and vaccine makers. And there's vaccine makers that they're shielded from liabilities. You can't sue. You can't sue them. If you look in the trials, there's all types of shady trials where they're not actually using proper protocol and testing it versus a saline inert injection. They're testing one vaccine against another vaccine, so the trials are just faulty. You're talking about how people who are on TV and your face all the time, like Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates, they have financial connections with pharmaceutical companies.
Big pharma.
You're talking about Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson and Johnson having a history of lawsuits against them. So they've heard all types of people, and a lot of those things are just not shared. They're not expressed to the public whatsoever. And then you have studies talking about the power of vitamin D and vitamin C, and even being used to treat coronavirus, not just to prevent, but to even treat. There's all sorts of reports, and yet the mainstream media, the corporate media, has nothing to say about it. They're really censoring information. Even if you put it on social media, your post is quick to be hidden, or you may even be put in Facebook jail where you can't even post about it or can't even message about it. So social media companies are even in on this censorship, and it's really terrifying because you can't get the right information if you can't get it on mainstream television, mainstream radio, and not even social media. So, So how I feel about vaccines specifically, you're talking about new type of vaccine technology, mRNA vaccine technology that hasn't been tested before. This is in human beings, and now they got emergency use authorization, which means here in the United States, the FDA won't even fully accept it, fully approve it. So it's pretty much saying, we don't 100% believe it, but go ahead, we're going to use it anyway. They skipped the animal studies, so we don't know how it affects animals. We don't have no long-term studies because, once again, it's never been effectively used, the mRNA vaccine technology specifically. So, this is one big experiment as far as I'm concerned, and it's not looking good because, according to the vaccine adverse event reporting system, VAERS, over 1,700 people have died following vaccines.
1,700.
Absolutely. If you go to these,
and which vaccine is this one?
Those are a combination of mostly Pfizer and Moderna.
Okay.
I think it's 50. At last check, it was 56% Pfizer and like 40% Moderna, and then a few percentage of unknown vaccines. But over 6,000 side effects, serious side effects. That includes things like anaphylactic shock, which is a serious allergic reaction. I think it was, what was it, 18 miscarriages, a few cases of Bell's palsy, paralysis of the face, um, just all sorts, heart attacks, all sorts of things that you would want to know about. If we're supposed to have informed consent here in the United States in a proper setting, in a proper world, you're supposed to know the risks and the rewards so you can make an informed decision. And they're not telling you any of that, and doctors are not being told so, and they're not telling their patients. So between all the secrecy and the censorship, and I just cannot rely on the medical system. And then if you want to add the race component about it, medical apartheid shows that they never cared about black people in the medical setting. Medical racism is a huge problem here in the United States. And so when people get on TV, public officials and elected officials talking about we care about black people and we want black people to get the shot first, that's just another thing that raises my antenna on top of every other issue that comes along with it. So I'll rely on the vitamins and the minerals and the food, and everybody else can rely on the vaccine and hope for the best.
I'll just say one more follow up before we get onto other topics at hand, is that I'm of the opinion that even if say going back to the whole hospital mask thing, even if a hospital mask isn't that effective as some claim it isn't, I think it's just much better to be safe than sorry. And when we go, when any of us goes to get an operation, or heaven forbid a loved one or a friend goes to get an operation, we want the doctors and the nurses to be wearing the hospital masks. So that's kind of what I would say to people who don't want to wear hospital masks. But I will just say, continuing on with what you were saying, I'm definitely of the opinion that coronavirus is very much a real thing. It is a deadly pandemic that is happening before our eyes. I think it did come from animals, very much like the Spanish flu pandemic of that happened during World War I. All that being said, I am afraid though of the very dodgy medical solutions that are being propped up, because with all the things that you have mentioned, a journalist who that I've actually invited on the show before, Whitney Webb, who does a lot of anti-imperialist journalism and exposed the human trafficking network of Epstein and the fact that the American and the British and the Israeli deep state had their hands all involved in that. And she's actually been reporting on the coronavirus, and it's very clear from what she's exposed that the powers to be are propping up very dodgy medical solutions, and under the guise of fighting coronavirus are ripping up our civil liberties. So, and you mentioned medical racism. I mean, I could definitely send you a copy of an article she did about the John Hopkins vaccine rollout and Palantir being involved in it, and it's quite frightening. But if you mention that, and this goes back to what I was saying to you off the air, how nobody seems to know how to walk and chew gum at the same time. When you mention that to the people who take very seriously that coronavirus is real and we should be having lockdowns and we should be having UBIs and suspending mortgages and rents. Well, when you mention that Pfizer has a bad track record, or that and all of the things that you just mentioned, you're automatically tarred and feathered of being a vaccine denialist and a tin hat foil person. When it's like, well, no, I'm not. I'm just saying that, like any medication, enter at your own risk, and Big Pharma does have a bad track record. What do you say to that?
Yeah, people who are quick to throw out names like conspiracy theorists, like, it's just a lack of critical thinking. They just tend to believe that whatever the mainstream media tells them to believe. And then when you tell them that, the VAERS reporting system reports 1,700 deaths, and unfortunately, even the government admits that that reporting system has less than 1% accuracy, meaning they collect usually less than 1% of the actual events. So that number could be much, much higher as far as the deaths following vaccine and serious effects following vaccine. So who knows? But you tell them that, and they say it's a coincidence. Not like one or two or 5 deaths after the vaccine is a coincidence. 1,700. Now you call me a conspiracy theorist. I call you a coincidence theorist. You got a lot of gullibility if you let people tell you there's no association whatsoever. So you just got to be critically a critical thinker. You have to question things and that don't make sense. You mentioned the mask, and once your surgeon wearing the mask, you want your surgeon wearing masks because you don't want them drooling and dribbling into your open wound. But that mask is not to protect surgeons from respiratory viruses when they're doing surgery. This is a respiratory virus. So when you talk about mask, just like oxygen can get around the mask, so can respiratory viruses. So that's why a lot of studies are showing that masks are not all that effective. And, if it makes you feel good and, it got that placebo effect, then that's not the same as being actual, adequate and protecting you. So you just got to look at opposing studies and see what makes sense. What's reality? Right now they're all sorts of fun science.
But isn't that exactly what the attorney, what the Surgeon General and the CDC and the FDA and the WHO, isn't that what their job is?
Yeah. That's why I don't believe them. If you look at the 1970, what was it, 1971 swine flu pandemic here in America, where they talked about everybody has to take the shot. Then they realized, and that was only after one death in Fort Dix, New Jersey. So one guy on a military base died from a, supposed pandemic, swine flu, and they called it a pandemic. And then all of a sudden they started mass promoting and trying to mandate vaccines, which end up killing people, and over 300 people, and then giving people neurological disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome. So you just got to be real careful, especially when you talked about the destruction of civil liberties. That's real terrifying. America's supposed to distinguish America from everything else. We're supposed to have these liberties, and they're just slashing it. Talk about you can't go outside, you can't travel. Some jobs are saying you can't work here if you don't take this experimental shot, this experimental gene therapy. So there's all sorts of
vaccine passports, and fining people hundreds of dollars and euros and pounds if they broke a curfew and whatnot.
Crazy, absolutely crazy. So you were just being attacked in all sides, being attacked physically, being attacked mentally, being attacked with our so-called liberties, which you're finding out these are not rights. These are more like privileges. And when the government, the so-called democratic government, is more like a tyrannical government, medical tyranny when it comes down to it. And if enough people don't fight back, talk about I got to take it. If I want to keep my job, if I want to get on a plane, if you don't fight back, then they're going to tell you whatever they want and force you to do whatever you want. And you need some more fight. And I'm not going to risk my life for a job.
I will just say one more thing in defense of wearing hospital masks. Fauci apparently on CBS or one of the corporate channels, he was saying that the only reason why we downplayed wearing hospital masks was because we actually didn't have enough hospital masks to supply to people, and that's why we were downplaying wearing hospital masks. But now that we have all the hospital masks in the world, yes, wearing hospital masks is very effective. And I thought to myself, you idiots, in a country where already people hate governments for rightly or wrongly, but I think everyone's got legitimate grievances against the powers that be, you've just made the situation worse by a bit. It's just like madness.
Now he's talking about one is not good enough. Now you got to wear 2 or 3.
Unbelievable. Well, hopefully this nightmare ends soon. And so on to the next topics at hand. I wanted to talk to you about is last summer was quite an intense summer of uprisings against the state murder of George Floyd, and it was wonderful to see global solidarity protests. But what was even more wonderful, if you take, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, these are all settler colonial societies, what they call the Five Eyes Alliance, is the plight of Indigenous people was being raised, and the plight of immigrants being, harassed by the police and institutional racism was all, the dirty laundry of the racist powers to be were all aired, including in France, including in Italy and Belgium. And I wanted to ask you, because you're from because you're from New York. New York has this I don't know where it got this reputation of being this wonderful liberal progressive state. Certainly more than Texas and Oklahoma. But you came from a state where police brutality is off the hook, where neo-Dickensian policies, the persecution of the poor and homelessness is off the hook. And can you talk to us about the legacy of a particular mayor, since Donald Trump is no longer president, and can you talk to us about the legacy of a guy called Rudi Giuliani and Police Commissioner Bill Bratton of Boston, Massachusetts, and their policy known as what was it called? It was the broken windows theory.
That too. Yep.
Can you talk to us about that, and how Giuliani even became mayor of New York through very vile, not even dog whistling, but go right ahead.
Yeah, I was in New York, grew up in New York, and Rudi Giuliani was stomping the grounds, talking big and bad, pushing the police. And I remember Police Commissioner Ray Kelly was talking about, we got to stop and frisk. Stop and frisk is going to clear the streets. And the broken windows policy you talk about, if there's a broken window, then there's going to be less respect for the community, and we got to clean up the community and make sure people are being respectable. And then we got to put police in there to make these communities better and cleaner and all that. And it just became more of a police state than anything. It became more of a destruction of any liberties, where they just pull you over and talk about, you look suspicious to me, put your hands on the wall and spread your legs, and we're going to stop and frisk you. And we know that, well over 80% of the people that were stopped and frisked were black and Latin people. And, more than 90% of them were completely innocent and were just, left to walk away after being completely harassed. That philosophy didn't go away after Giuliani. Bloomberg kept it right up. Mike Bloomberg, continued that unabatedly. And so this New York's been disrespecting black people for a very long time. The police, I remember the Amadou Diallo case very clearly, where he got shot 41 times for holding up his wallet at the door. I remember Sean Bell got shot 50 times, and believe he was celebrating his wedding. And then there's, story after story after story of the unjust killing of black people, of innocent black people or unarmed black people, and a lot of those cops just walked. The white supremacist structure of the mayor, the police chief, the police union, the jury, the judge. They just let all these people go. They just made excuses for all of them, and I don't believe one person got punished. And if they did get punished, they didn't get punished for a very long time. And when I mean punished, I don't mean fired. I mean incarcerated. I mean imprisoned. That, the normal, what's supposed to happen when you kill someone unjustly. So, white supremacy is alive and well in so-called liberal New York City. And Governor Cuomo.
And before we get to Cuomo and Bill De-Blasio, you already answered, because I was going to ask you about Bloomberg's legacy, but Bloomberg was he was second to command to Giuliani, so he succeeded Giuliani. Maybe on some social liberal policies he was more better. But then again, Giuliani, he campaigned as being a liberal Republican, that he was going to be friends to, the queer community, the Latino communities. When he tried to run for president, he said that he believed in stem cell research, but oftentimes that's usually just nothing but bunk to get the affluent, who are more socially liberal, to vote for them. But then once they're in power, they act like the goonish, classist, racist Republicans that they are. The white man's party, as Glenn Ford would say, right?
Yeah. They're all on the similar page. I don't see them as all that much different. I don't get too caught up in this whole Republican Democrat game. I see them as the common phrase, two wings of the same bird, the same white supremacist bird. So it's two sides of the same white supremacist coin. However you want to phrase it, that's what you always got to keep in mind. If you watch mainstream media all day, ran by the same companies that fund the politicians, fund the media, so they have you in on this game and have you think that one side is so much better than the other or so much worse than the other. But you gotta think outside of that, and that's why it's so important to look at other resources.
But why did the electorate vote for Giuliani and gave him more than one election? Why did the New York electorate vote for Giuliani all those times?
I don't know. I don't know. I was young when Giuliani came up, and I know when 9/11 happened, he was the mayor, and people got scared. So when people are in fear, they do a lot of irrational things, and he was acting all big and tough and bad, and so people were like, "Oh, he's the guy," and he said he got everything under control, so I'm going to listen to whatever he has to say. And he was talking tough, and really it didn't matter what he was saying. People were scared, and they were looking to somebody who seemed confident and in control, and that's what he represented to a lot of people. So, and the media, backed him up, made him seem like the hero of the day. I think he was on national news, in the national spotlight and a lot, and maybe on the cover of a few magazines as the guy and the U.S. Mayor, the nation's mayor, and all sorts of foolishness. So, it's just mainstream media promoting somebody who really should not be promoted.
It's kind of surprising because you talk because like you said, I mean New York, to be fair, evil did not start under Giuliani. New York has always had a huge, across the U.S. There's racism. There is institutional racism and police brutality. Like evolution, it just keeps getting worse and worse, worse and worse. And but under Giuliani, you mentioned the Amadou Diallo case. Is the reason why even those newspapers, those supposedly liberal newspapers like the New York Daily News or the New York Times and all those other papers that did support the whole broken windows theory, as opposed to, well, why don't we actually just invest more in communities? Why don't we just use government to be a friend to people, as opposed to always propping up business? Is the reason why there was so much outrage, at least with the Amadou Diallo case, this unarmed black immigrant that was shot 41 times, some people say 43 times, because of the fact that it was so clear that this was a racist state murder, and yet Giuliani just kept defending the police over and over again, that even those papers that did prop up him and Bratton said, "Man, Rudi, you're an asshole this time around," or
yeah, I sometimes it's just hard for people to defend you if you're so blatant with your white supremacy. They like to keep it undercover. They like to keep it on code, as they say. You're supposed to be subtle with it and with dog whistles and plausible deniability. But if you're so just out loud and abrupt and defending someone or some people who are clearly in the wrong, then some people will back off you, or at least seemingly back off you, and then they'll come back around and defend you because Americans have a short memory. So unfortunately, they forget about things like that, and then they'll come back up in future incidences like like the Sean Bell, like goodness, I who's the just forget the guy who got choked out in Staten Island.
I believe you're talking about Eric Garner, right?
Yep, Eric Garner. That happened in Staten Island, New York. And De-Blasio didn't do much better in that case. He was all defending the cops or talking about he couldn't do anything. His hands were tied, and he allowed the union to run all over him, and just case after case. You talked about how the system just defends itself. It just covers itself. It just backs itself. So, yeah, these politicians in New York don't get any praise from me.
Cuomo, Cuomo, how do you assess how do you assess his time in power? Just you've already said Democrats, Republicans, not much difference at all, right?
Yeah, don't know as much about Cuomo, but I do know that his economic policies and some of his policies are also in support of big business and really not in support of the general populace. And his current problems don't help of sexual assaults and his policies about pushing people, elderly people with coronavirus, back in elderly homes and then watching them die at astonishing rates and keeping quiet about it and hushing about it. All that is just terrible. So you just add his economic policies that most people don't know about, along with his new found fame after seemingly standing up against Trump. He was supposed to be all big and bad because he was speaking boldly against Trump. And they made him out to be once again a national figurehead, and he won an Emmy for having press conferences. Foolishness, just a big old charade, political theater. But he wasn't like everybody else. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't pushing, nutrition and vitamins, and he was even New York hospitals. There was a hospital in Long Island that was treating people with vitamin C therapy, intravenous vitamin C, and no word from Cuomo, no word from De-Blasio. So he was in on the censorship and the silencing of anybody pushing that narrative. So, I don't the relatively little I know about Cuomo has not been good. He's not been good in my book, and I don't know how well he'll fare with all these new allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault. But if he leaves, he leaves.
But as the great Frank Zappa once said, the torture never stops, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, they got another white supremacist ready to take over, ready to take the reins. It's just we just have to learn our lesson. I'm talking about the masses, the public, the voting public, the black community in particular. You got to realize when you're being played over and over again, you keep falling for the same trick. If you listen to a Malcolm X Ballad of the Bullet speech and you realize that everything
I love that speech.
Everything he's saying is completely relevant to what it is now. It's quite it's damn near depressing. Like, wow, the same exact issues he's talking about he could have said that same speech yesterday and it would have been just as relevant. And that means we haven't learned in over 50, 60 years of making the same mistake year after year, decade after decade. It means you're doing something wrong. We need to stop voting for the people who are disrespecting and abusing us, that being the Democrats and the Republicans. Need to go, get rid of those parties and start anew. So we can try the Green Party, we can try the Libertarian Party. We get radical with it. Just don't repeat the same politicians that don't give a damn about you. They definitely have shown that they aren't to be trustworthy and aren't to be trusted. So if you keep on voting for your own demise, then you're just hurting yourself and you're hurting me and my family, and I don't appreciate it.
Right on, spot on. Couldn't have said it better myself. And I wanted to ask you then, if people, if people still, continue to vote for the Democratic Party, are you, I'm sort of the opinion that there almost seems to be no hope, because what does it have to take for people to to I mean, I'm glad that many people don't ever want that many people are afraid of the Republican Party or the Conservative Party of Britain and their sister parties in New Zealand, Australia, and elsewhere. But when you have like the Democratic Party or Labour or the Liberal Party and sometimes the NDP being these rival oligarchic parties, if I mean, so take the U.S. for example. If last summer was not a breaking point and people continue to vote for somebody like Joe Biden, who helped give us the new Jim Crow, the welfare reform, all of those neo-classist, neo-Dickensian policies and racist policies, then if not now, it's like it's just never going to happen. If people are just not going to vote for a Green Party, a party for socialism and liberation, or any of the other alternative left parties or anti-imperialist parties.
Yeah. People should learn their lesson with Obama, and in my view, once
exactly.
Obama let your black people down, and then people voted for him again. Even if I voted for him the first time, I knew better not to vote for him the second time. I actually learned from my mistakes. When I see someone is not representing me, I see no reason to vote for him. A lot of people are just voting for fun. They're just voting for symbolism, and it's just they don't take these politics stuff seriously, and it's not a game. There's real consequences to your foolish voting patterns and voting behavior. So people need to stop and learn the lessons. And if you didn't learn it from the Bill Clinton, obviously you learned that George W. Bush, you wasn't feeling him, you wasn't feeling Trump. So why and didn't get anything from Obama. So you should realize these two parties aren't where it's at. Time to do something different. But if you are tuned in to 24/7 to mainstream media, corporate media, which keeps on pushing these parties, which keeps on neglecting and ignoring other options, and they only have you believe there's only two options, two bad options, and you keep on repeating that foolish remark, you got to vote for the lesser of two evils, then you're going to completely support the downfall of your community. You're going to completely support evil willingly. When people say that, I'm like, are you listening to yourself? Act like this is a free country. You say this is a free country. Let's act like this is a free country and actually vote for your interests. Act like you want this world to be a better place. You want the country to be a better place, and vote for the policies that you want. Let's actually go over policy by policy. How you feel? Do you feel this? How do you feel about war? How do you feel about education? How do you feel about healthcare? And do any of these parties actually feel how you feel? No, then don't vote for them. It's not too hard of a concept to vote for somebody who aligns with your interests. So, are people going to wake up? I'm afraid not. I try to be optimistic, but I try to be realistic at the same time. And the fact is, people are still tuning into CBS and CNN and MSNBC and Fox News. And as long as they tune into those channels and they got the grip on the minds.
And then, of course, with the with that disgusting anti-Russia conspiracy theory and that scapegoating, because America just stopped being racist the moment we had Obama. It's just the white supremacists. They just mobilized more under Trump. And it's like, oh, come on. And really, the Russians, RT is the one that's causing Americans to be more polarizing towards one another. I just thought but the fact that so many left-leaning outlets also were pushing anti-Russia conspiracy theories, isn't that also the big problem? That it's not just people being spoon-fed corporate media, but even supposedly left-leaning media is saying we got to attack Assad. We have to. We have to keep the Chinese in line, and we have to get tough on Putin because he helped Pumpkinhead get elected.
Yeah. White supremacy and imperialism are powerful forces, and between the educational system and the media, they just warped the mind. So it's hard to think outside that box, outside that frame, outside that structure. So it takes a hell of a lot of effort and a hell of a lot of research outside of that when you're being bombarded with those same messages over and over and over again. So, Yeah, it is disappointing that somebody that you think is open their minds outside of the mainstream corporate media, but they're still parroting some of those same narratives. It is disappointing. And will people wake up to the media hijinks? I don't know. You know, you mentioned the big outrise, the outpouring last summer, and that was supposed to give people hope. Yeah, some people got hope, like, oh, I think Americans have had enough. Well, as you can see now, it seems like they went right back to sleep. This is they went. You know, Joe Biden done rocked them back to sleep, and everybody is done, and they think white supremacy is over, police brutality is over, racism is over, unless the TV tells them that racism is back on. So it's you just got to be once again a critical thinker, and you have to learn not to listen to mainstream media because that will poison your mind, and just like Malcolm X told you would, that to praise, you know, mainstream news will have you praise the perpetrator and victim and look at the victim as the bad guy. So, you know, he said, don't let the oppressor educate you. So you got to really look to black media if you want to be empowered and look somebody back empower your community. You got to look to black media. You got to look to black schools. You really got to separate yourself from white supremacy as much as you can, from what you watch, from what schools you go to, from you know, even what you eat, what you look to as medicine. You got your European medicine, your white American medicine, and then you got your African medicine. You got your holistic medicine. So it all comes from white supremacy, and you got to really separate yourself as much as possible for you to have a productive and a useful life.
Now, Troy, when I had your friend Solomon on twice on the show, we talked about black black American culture, black American subculture, and I'm just curious, are you more of a fan of black music, whether it be rap, R&B, uh, uh, or or whatever or whatever is coming out of the music industry, as opposed to Hollywood and what's coming out of like Hollywood? Or do you prefer one or the other? And if so, why do you prefer one or the other?
Oh yeah, I'm into hip hop and R&B. Those are my favorite two genres of music, and I don't watch many movies, so yeah, I'm definitely the music guy. Definitely more of the I guess old school R&B. Whether you're talking about Isley Brothers and Earth, Wind and Fire, who got a verses on April 4th, or whether you're talking about the Biggies, Biggies and the Tupacs and the Nas. That's what I'm into as far as music is concerned. Hip hop and R&B. Don't really get around to movies.
And I completely agree with you on that. And why do you think the music resonates? Why do you think music resonates with yourself more, as opposed to what's coming out of, like, the 90s was sort of like the golden age of black sitcoms, or I mean, well, there's not much good that comes out of Hollywood, but even the stuff that did come out of Hollywood in the 90s, I mean, unless it was, something like Boys in the Hood or Friday, I really don't care too much for a lot of the stuff that's that comes out Black Hollywood. And so why so and is that the same for you? And why and why is that for you? Like, why do you prefer the music as opposed to what comes out of Black Hollywood?
Music is just calms you. You can listen to it in whether it in a good mood or in a bad mood. It lifts me up. It is meaningful. It is fun to dance to. It's just I just see it as a more convenient form of entertainment and even uplift. And Hollywood, not as convenient. You can't listen to it in your car, and you need to you know set aside 2 hours to watch it. And then there's a lot of propaganda, a lot of pushing promotion of negative images and messaging, and a lot of stifling of productive uplifting messaging. So there's that as well, and of course that is a problem in the music. There's definitely no doubt about that, how
Yeah.
destructive corporate radio is, some of the rap that's coming out now. It's it shouldn't even be in the same category. Some of it was mumble rap and all this other destructive messaging and imagery
Yeah.
in the rap and the hip hop. So there is that. But yeah, it's just more fun to me to listen to music, and it's just how I grew up. My parents grew up blasting music in the house, so it just stayed with me.
And so that being said, what do you think is the real legacy, what do you think is some of the negative legacies of, say, something like The Cosby Show or The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and uh, and even some of the movies that Spike Lee has done that we're supposed to consider wonderful, and even some of those black comedy movies. What do you think are some of the negative legacies and images that they leave the public with, particularly the black public?
Well, with entertainment, the major problem is there's not a balance, or there's not enough diversity in perspective. You got too much violence and not enough showcasing of the good in the community. They highlight only one set of black people, not another set. We got black people are, of course, are diverse people, and we just don't have rappers and athletes and entertainers. We got doctors and architects and carpenters and every category of job, every occupation, every every preference in the work world and outside the work world. So just the lack of diversity is probably the main problem if you're talking about the negativity from a Fresh Prince.
Well, what I mean by negativity is I liked it as as a sitcom. I remember the BBC would show all the seasons, and I actually even ended up watching all the seasons of Fresh Prince. But the problem I have with the Fresh Prince is that the idea that you just got to take a poor black kid from a poor neighborhood, put him with some rich relatives, and then everything is going to be all hunky dory. That's that's sort of the a weird thing about the Fresh Prince, which I kind of have a problem with. But in terms of like them dealing with issues that did face the black community, like racism, or even black people discriminating against others because why are you talking white and stuff like that. I think the show is very positive in that respect. But then you have a show like The Cosby Show, which paints this ridiculous fairy tale that's of this very affluent family in which only racism is a problem as opposed to the whole class structure. And you had apparently many people who liked The Cosby Show because it hid some of the awful things that was happening to the black community at the time, which the state inflicted, like the crack epidemic and so forth. But of course, and of course, we know that Bill Cosby was very famous for kind of lecturing black people on, you got to pull your pants up, and you got shot. Well, what were you doing with that pound cake? What were you doing stealing a pound cake? And all these, girls that are having, babies, and they're not going to know if they're having sex with their grandmas and stuff like that. So The Cosby Show, it painted, I mean, that's what it was. It was a fairy tale, a very positive fairy tale. And like you said, there are, we do have black doctors, we do have black academics, and we do have, black architects and so forth. But as you mentioned, the problem with the entertainment industry is that is that they just don't even know how to do basic, diversities and tell diverse stories. And that's also the same with the Latino community. And I'm pretty sure if I had more Indigenous friends, they would probably say that yes, things are terrible on the reserves, but there are people doing extraordinary work that also doesn't get talked about. And so it's always this, there is no hope. So what do you say to that in terms of shows like The Cosbys and other shows which often depicted a black middle class or a black affluent class.
Yeah, I can definitely see your point that they may have ignored certain issues and they've yeah, just just too much fairy tale, not enough reality. But I don't look for every show to do everything. I don't think every black show has to touch every issue in the black community. They have the right to push certain storylines, and that's why we should have just an array of shows. The show Blackish. I don't watch much TV these days, but I hear there's a show called Blackish that
I've
has
heard of it too, and I've not made the time to watch it yet.
yeah, they're pretty good at touching current events and touching more of the hard hitting storylines that really teach lessons and really challenge some of the white supremacist problems in the community. So that's probably a show you would be proud of. And then back in the day, they did have they had The Wire, which showed some of the problems in Baltimore regarding some of the issues with poverty and drugs and stuff like that. I remember they had New York Undercover, which was the show I used to watch it, but that was more of a police show, but did show some of the problems as far as class and economics are concerned. So yeah, it's just what you're looking to get out of certain shows. But yeah, I can appreciate what you're coming from, trying to make everything seem so perfect and saying that there's more than one way to rise in the black community besides going to a rich neighborhood. There's other solutions out there.
And you now talking about music, and I love music, love all kinds of music. And but do you now do you think that I don't know how old you are, but I'm starting to get old. I'm 30 years old now, and so, and as a guy who loves history, and sometimes I look back on on certain things in my life, and I think, I I could have handled that situation better, or I was a real jerk in that situation. And before, I used to be very defensive of rap music, and I hated when people would say that, like, oh, it glorifies violence and stuff like that. But although looking back, I can sort of see where that criticism comes, that rap music did engage in misogyny, certainly queer phobia, and kind of promoting machismo and violent masculinity. So do you think there's some truth to that, but that's regardless of that, rap music itself was the art form that was certainly gangster rap, of just depicting the reality of certain communities, be it South Central Los Angeles or parts of Baltimore or parts of yours truly, New York and other places?
Yeah, of course. A lot of rap has pushed and even highlighted and glorified violence and disrespect of women. But at the same time, you had a bunch of rap and hip hop that uplifted people, educated people, gave people hope, gave people life. But of course, because of we live in the white supremacist system, those songs were not played as much. Those songs, the record labels were like, "Nah, you can't do that here. You want to make radio, you need to pull your pants down and be a little rougher and be a little tougher and be a little more violent." So that's just an issue of white supremacy. However, you got these rappers that they participated in that. They said, "I'm going to dumb down my music. I'm going to drop all the high vocabulary and the positive messages, and I will mumble my foolishness in order to get the money in the record deal." And some people decided they wasn't going to sacrifice their principles and their ethics and morals, and maybe it required them to make less money, or they found an independent route in order to still make the money. You still got your Common still made money when he was talking some consciousness. Talib Kweli found a way to make money. Most Def and found a way to make some money. And the list goes on. The Erykah Badu, she found a way to make positive messaging in the R&B world. She found a way to not have to get naked and crude in her lyrics. Jill Scott, they found a way to make the music without going all Nicki Minaj and Cardi B-ish. So there are people who make a way. You don't have to give in to the record labels that say you have to downgrade yourself and your people in order to make money. So I suggest people find that route.
But it sounds to me as if rap music and similar and similar musics. Brazil has its own rap scene. France had its own rap scene. Jamaica. The UK has this interesting music coming out called grime. But it sounds to me as if it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you don't talk about the poverty and and the fact that so many people take the gang lifestyle, then people will complain that you're not talking about what's really going on. And then it seems that when you do talk about it, then people go, oh, you're talking too much about negative stuff, and now you're glorifying the violence. So, do you think that's why the music at some point it became oversaturated with bling bling rap because we are talking about Hollywood and and the sitcom world, not enough diversity. At least in the 90s and the early 2000s, there was diverse rap music where you had the lighthearted stuff, you had the conscious stuff, you had the the West Coast gangster rap and the G-funk and some of the stuff that was coming out of New York. But now, of course, I mean, with the exception of some, and it took me a while to get into Kendrick Lamar, but I do like some of the stuff he does, especially if you know stuff like spoken word, and J. Cole, is an interesting character, within himself. Kid Cudi, although he doesn't talk about being poor or rich, he talks about his mental health struggle, which is something I completely relate to. That the problem now with rap music or even R&B music is that there just is the lack of diversity and the fact that so much of it has just been taken over by people who just want to dumb it down to its heart's content, where yeah, it's all this mumble gibberish some of it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're talking about it today. You just got to search a little harder. You got to. Luckily, we'd have individual platforms that allow the internet is allowing more people to be heard, and more people is finding ways to make money off their music with all these different streaming platforms. Whether it's Tidal with Jay-Z, whether it's the independent Apple Music deals and the Spotify deals and Pandora and all that. And Immortal Technique is a hardcore conscious rapper, and he found a way to make money without sacrificing principles and his message. So people have found a way, and KRS-One, he talked about his life growing up, and you can reflect your realities without glorifying it. You could talk about the messages and what you learned from your rough upbringing. You don't have to, you can make it an educational piece, a edifying piece, a uplifting piece, rather than saying this is how it was and this is the way I got to be and just negative, negative, negative. You can definitely turn a negative into a positive, so and then get around the system and find a way to profit off of it. So we got and with the new rise of cryptocurrency and definitely NFTs and trying and making money in a decentralized platforms, people are finding ways to make money, without the corrupt hand of the music industry. So it's going to be very, very interesting as people find ways to get out the normal systems, the traditional systems, and so their messaging can rise and they don't have to sacrifice their principles and ethics. So it's looking up. You just got to turn off the radio and turn on the internet.
I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I think it's a bit disappointing. It's funny because it was International, Women's Day several weeks ago, and just last month it was Black, History Month. And one thing I've been thinking about a lot I like a lot of EDM music, electronic dance music and techno music and house music and the sort of different different genres. So and I find myself listening a lot to kind of like pop vocalists, whether it's Dua Lipa, Charlie XCX, Georgia, and stuff like that, or Lily Allen. But sometimes I watch take somebody like SZA. Where I like some of her music. Dua Lipa, I like a lot of her music, but then sometimes I watch a performance that they do where they're always in their underwear or they're scantily dressed and so forth, and I think to myself, damn, that's a shame. I mean, I'm not a prude or or anything. I'm not a socially conservative person, but it's like, come on, like, you are beautiful. You're doing great music. Why do you have to do that to yourself, especially when there are so many young girls listening to your music in which, in which a lot of them do copy, the attitudes that, that are depicted, because because people are influenced by, when they see, their rock bands, being aggressive or rappers, not having, basic table manners and so forth. And I think it's almost the same thing with these women who all, for the most part, are very positive, do produce a lot of positive messages. But then when you see them, always dancing in their underwear and so forth, you think, really? Do you really have to do that? Like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, I take it you didn't appreciate the Grammy performance by Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion.
I've not heard about it, but you see, that's the thing that annoys me. I like Cardi B. I've listened to some of Cardi B's music, but it is hilarious how at least like every other music video I see of her, it's her dry humping or it's her stripping. And I know once upon a time she was a stripper, but at the same time you think, your music could be just as effective if you didn't dress naked. I mean, we had our Lil Browns and our Foxy Browns. I mean, does it really? But why does it have to be so excessive? And it's not. Yeah. So, no, I've not watched the Grammys. I know Joni Mitchell once described the Grammys, and I've once described the MTV as like a porn convention, as soft pornography, nothing but titillating images, and you just see one person after another, one celebrity after another, not really wearing much, and you go, geez, do they not have an entourage that says to them? Because that's the problem with Beyonce. Beyonce is always just. And what's ironic about Beyonce is that when she was with Destiny's Child, one thing I loved about Destiny's Child and R&B music was that they didn't have to do it. When they were sexy, it was every now and then, but they were normal. But now Beyonce, it's like it's just constantly, even when she does pseudo black leftist stuff, it's just always her showing off that booty and all of that stuff. So your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. How do I feel like policing them? Do I feel like telling them to put their clothes on? Sometimes, but for the most part, I just say, let them be. And if they can, if TV would be more responsible in showing more clothed women, then we wouldn't have such a problem with the unclothed women. It's just like I said before, the lack of diversity and the lack of showing the different narratives and the different perspectives. And if all you see is 90% booty shaking, then I understand how little girls think that's what you have to do. But if you show 50% booty shaking, nudity, and 50% classy, elegant, articulate, then you understand that you don't have to do the nudity, that there is another way. So just if you have more different perspectives, then I don't think we would have as much of a problem as we would have with the Cardi B's and the Megan Thee Stallions. So that's less responsibility on them, more responsibility on the people who are responsible for putting these images on TV, and then the images that we choose to watch. People talk about, what about my children? Well, you gotta kind of do your best to control what you put in front of your children and what they take in. Obviously, there's no perfect way to do that with the internet, but you just have to introduce them different performers, different images. So say, yeah, there's Cardi B, but there's also Erykah Badu and Anita Baker, and classy women who don't never had to take their clothes off to get attention, and they still got a bunch of attention and fame and riches. So we just gotta make sure we exposed to everything.
Paloma Faith, who's a British singer I like, once said, Beyonce, you don't have to be a feminist and be scantily dressed. You can, dress up and yeah. So I completely agree with what you had just said. The last three questions I want to ask you is the last three questions I wanted to ask you are this. So here's this one. In the quest of racial social justice, there's talks of there's not where we've now gotten to a point where people, including those in independent media, are talking about defunding the police. Where do you stand on that? Are you of the opinion? Well, no, not where do you stand on defunding the police. I wanted to ask you if in the activist circles and the communities you're part of, that you're engaged with, are there calls for people who say that it's important, to defund the police, but what we also need to do is we need to end the drug war. We need to end the drug war and approach drug addiction as a public mental health issue, not just decriminalize, but legalize, whatever drugs and get the bad ones, off the streets. Like, are there any talks about that? Because I'm not hearing any talks about that. And on top of that, in the communities that you're engaged with, are people saying, well, if we're going to defund the police or demilitarize the police, we need to also demilitarize the global police officers who stop and frisk people across the world, which is the U.S. military, and of course abolishing, the deep state, the CIA, the NSAs, and their partners in crime in the Five Eyes Alliance.
Yeah, there's talk about all of that, and not everybody's uniform. You got people who are okay with the funding. I can be okay with them getting less funding. I know when they talked about the $1 billion NYPD budget, that could be we could be just as safe with them having a little less money. I know that money could be used elsewhere if we want a better, more educated, more healthier community. I know we can do a lot more with that money elsewhere, but we got to focus on removing white supremacy from the system. That is the main driver, because even if you take away, you could cut their budget in half, but if the white supremacy is still there, there will be just as much shootings. You see, if you don't punish the cops, if you don't incarcerate the cops, if the judges and the politicians and the juries still let these cops walk free, it doesn't matter if you cut their budget by 90%. So a lot of people need to realize that the funding is a crucial issue, but it's not the main issue.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a symptom of the main cause is all the white supremacy. There's all these reports coming out of white supremacist gangs in the police force, whether it be the NYPD or the LAPD or different police departments around. Even the FBI admits that white supremacists have infiltrated local police forces around the country. There was no word on whether they're going to do anything about it, but they admitted, yeah, we got white supremacists, KKK members in the local police force. We're not gonna do anything about it, but they're there. So it's just a huge problem.
And yeah, exactly. And but what also needs to be part of the conversation is we also need to amend the Constitution. Nobody talks about amending the Constitution and getting rid of that loophole, which is in the 13th amendments, which I talked about with a previous guest of mine, Ilana Porter of the Penn Center for Human Rights and Self-Determination. The 13th Amendment, and anyone who has seen that documentary of Ava DuVernay's talks about how, the 13th Amendment, the 13th Amendment, there's that loophole that the moment you're convicted of a crime, you're a slave, and and of course that's makes the new Jim Crows much easier. The drug war, of course, made the new Jim Crow easier, and Clinton getting tough on crime, continuing on with Reagan getting tough on crime. So are there many people also talking about how we really do need to amend the Constitution? I know the Constitution's wonderful; it came from God and so forth, but God is giving us some signs that we gotta, amend this and make it better, get rid of the bad stuff, right?
Yeah. I don't know how many politicians are serious about it, though. Unfortunately, you do need the politicians, whether it be the main congressional politicians, or you're talking about amending it with, 3/4 of the state legislators, the states in the United States. So it's going to be a huge challenge, because even when we do have police terrorism at work, and you get politicians to act like they care, it's simply mostly an act. They're just they get temporary lip service until the attention dies down in the media, and the media gets you to focus on something else. So there is maybe a growing acceptance of eliminating the drug war, and that marijuana is becoming legal in more and more states. And with the opioid addiction affecting white people, now they know they don't want prison to be the number one punitive measure, since we don't want to put a bunch of white people in jail. So now there's a lot of more grace and mercy for people that are addicted to drugs. So they're being light on heroin users, and meth users, which are mostly white. So you see white supremacy is all over the place in the drug war, in the outer wars. You talk about the international wars. The international police, and it's all capitalism and white supremacy wherever you go. Capitalism and white supremacy in the medical system, in the legal system, in the business world, in the educational system. Those are the two main drivers and motives of almost everything here in the United States, and in many countries across the globe.
Well, one can only hope that the people power movements just get stronger and stronger, and that more people, especially in the Black community and the Latino community and Indigenous community, say that, if we're going to be that our victories are only going to be half won and are not going to be complete if we talk about defunding the police and community control over the police, demilitarizing the police, and ending these their Dickensian attitude. It's only going to be half won, and we have to fight against colonialism, imperialism abroad, as well as ending the global drug war, since what the U.S. does at home is even it's that on steroids when it comes to Brazil and Mexico and places like that. And so and then my second to last question I want to ask is I've seen a lot of the programs that you and Solomon have produced at Your World News and the 3 YouTube pages that you have, and one theme which I really appreciate that comes from you and the team is justice for Native Americans and dismantling the very extreme apartheid and the ongoing colonization Native Americans suffer under, and as well as canceling Thanksgiving Day, canceling the 4th of July, canceling Columbus Day, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me as if Native Americans often are fighting their battles on their own and don't get the same level of solidarity or attention that immigrant communities get, or that Palestinians get, or even the plight of our people, which gets world headline news. Is that starting to change just a little bit? That more Black people are saying that that we have to fight shoulder to shoulder with Native Americans and end the Jim Crows that they live under.
Well, that's a very interesting issue because there's definitely there may be even a debate on whether we should. Well, to your first point, yeah, Native Americans seem to be fighting on their own. A lot of people feel like they're extinct. A lot of politicians.
Yeah. I remember we were part of a panel that Solomon organized, where we talked about to hell with Thanksgiving Day and Columbus Day, and it was a fascinating panel. I really enjoyed the other guests, Erica, who were part of it. And you mentioned that there literally are people who think that Native Americans don't even exist. So.
Oh yeah, I mean the only attention No, it's okay. The only attention I remember Native Americans getting in the mainstream news was the fight over the Washington football team, which was called the Washington Redskins. That's about as much attention as I got. And maybe back when they was talking about the Keystone Pipeline, maybe you hear some issues about how the pipeline was leaking oil in native lands, and natives were fighting the oil pipelines crossing their tribal lands. But outside of that, there's a lot of people who don't know Native Americans. They don't care about Native Americans. They hardly make the news. They are they're just people on reserves with on reservations with the casinos, and they don't really make the limelight. Just mostly recently, you hear politicians make the effort to include the term Native American or tribal. Now they're using the term tribal in their speech. Like, make sure we gotta make sure we say Black, Latino, Asian, and don't forget the Native Americans. I keep forgetting the Native Americans. I went to a Native American reservation in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, back in 2007, I believe. It was a spring break university sponsored trip. So that was cool to see, to be on a reservation and see what some of the issues that they were dealing with live and hearing from them talk about the rampant alcoholism and the rampant suicide and how their communities were very much struggling from a lot of government neglect. So we definitely bonded on government neglect. But the reason I said there's a divergence of opinion in the Black activist community, because there's a strong group called ADOS, the American Descendants of Slaves, or some people call themselves Foundational Black Americans. And this is just a group that says, listen, we just want to focus on Black Americans who have a legacy, or descendants of slaves, and we don't really care about everybody else. And even Dr. Claude Anderson, who wrote the book Powernomics and a lot of powerful books that I agree with, he talks about how Native Americans were complicit in slavery and enslaved Black people, and really don't they really align with white supremacy in a lot of cases, and hold a lot of anti-Black sentiment. So there are Black people, a considerable amount of Black people that say, nah, Native Americans can be on their own. They don't really fight for Black people, so why should we fight against them? So that's a very interesting perspective.
To which, sorry to interrupt, to which I would say, well, this was their land first, and they were the victims of divide and conquer, just the way some Africans participated in the slave trade, and really, you're gonna be you're okay to sometimes be in the same room with a white person and finger wag them about how you need to owe us reparations, but you don't want to fight for where this foundation came from, which was the dispossession of Native Americans.
Yeah, that's
Mexicans and Puerto Ricans.
Yeah, that's why it's a very interesting fight. But I do understand both sides. I do understand that we Black people have fought a lot for other races, and the love has not been reciprocal. There's been a lot of us fighting for the immigrants to come here of different nationalities, and then they come over here and they line right up with white supremacy and their anti-Black rhetoric and their anti-Black actions. And then if Native Americans have had a part in that, then I do understand some of that sentiment. But and then the first Americans were Black, so then there's that issue of whose land is it really? Yeah, we just look for anybody who's against white supremacy. If you're aligned with white supremacy, then we can't rock with you. If you're fighting it, then perhaps there's a chance of us rocking with you. It just has to be a consistent fight. You just can't be sometimes anti-white supremacy and then okay with it. You know, you can't be switching sides on the battlefield. You got to be on our side or not on our side. So that's the issue with a lot of people, both in the black community and out the black community. You know, we got our problems of intra-racial traitors, people who want to align with white supremacy when it's convenient, when it's their job is on the line, or when they can get a raise on their job, and or they can get in the political limelight. Then they go into political mode and start speaking like a white supremacist. And some of the biggest white supremacists are black. So you got to watch out for everybody. The black white supremacists, the native white supremacists, the Asian white supremacists. It's attack, wide ranging attack, very prevalent, and you always got to watch your back. So yeah, it's very, very interesting.
But so at the moment, though, is it safe to say that the situation is still very bleak in terms of a solidarity building between the black community and the indigenous community, unlike in, say, Canada, for example, where the Black Lives Matter there and the Native Lives Matter, or Idle No More, or Red Power, anti-colonial struggle, whatever you want to call it. But there's a growing emergence of merging of black solidarity with native solidarity, and of course even the whites, Marxists, one of their big top 5 issues that that they're constantly talking about is we need to dismantle the apartheid that indigenous Canadians suffer under. But at the moment, that attitude just not there yet in the U.S. Or
I don't see it. There's probably some groups out there. I just don't see much of it. Yeah, a lot of the groups I hang around talk about it's hard enough to get black people together, so it's that's their main focus. So trying to get others who may not totally align with our experience and may not totally be on the same page. It's let's leave them out for now. Let's focus on black people. So it's interesting strategies. Definitely. I just like to do strategies that work. Sometimes a big problem is people continue to try strategies that have not been effective, and definitely don't want to do that. So rainbow coalitions, this is I'm more of the pro-black, trying to focus on black people and not so much trying to align with other communities that have shown a lot of anti-black sentiment or real inconsistent when it comes to speaking up for black people. I can't get down with that.
Just very briefly then, before I get to the last question, then, talk about that. Can you talk a bit about that? Because I'd like to know more what you mean by that. Talk about that. About how some local rainbow coalitions didn't work out.
You go to just sometimes like some black groups are open to other races coming in, and sometimes you just see how they want to change the subject. You talk about white supremacy, and they want to change it from a racial issue to a class issue, and you're like, no, let's not do that. You're deflecting. You're watering down the message. Sometimes they want to divert from a racial anti-black issue to a sexual orientation issue, and like, no, don't do that. That's disrespectful. You have groups and you have associations that deal with your issue. Let's deal with the issue we're here for. If the group is called Black Lives Matter, don't come here talking about other lives. We're focused. We're trying to focus here and have laws passed to protect black lives and movements, and we're trying to open black businesses and black schools and black media, and when you come in and talk about I want to change the subject, I as a poor white person feel I'm not being heard. This is not the platform for that. not when you're in a pro-black room, a black empowerment group. You don't come changing the subject. Usually black people don't go into, Asian groups talk about what about us. There's just
Although
different.
there's often a lot of that there's also a lot of that happens as well, though.
Probably, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not sure how often it happens. I know other communities are more.
Well, you would know more better, since I haven't lived in the U.S. for a long time, and when I did live in the U.S., I didn't experience institutional racism there, which is an interesting story in and of itself. But you have lived in the U.S. way more than me. You are based there, so if you say that kind of stuff happens, then then I have no reason to not believe you. Which, funny enough, that's a perfect segue then because it's interesting, because I actually talked about this with Solomon, about how there are some white Marxists. They're very well-meaning. They are people I would definitely go to a protest with, and and organize a lot of events with. But there is a lot of white Marxists who do engage in in class reductionism. So they say, don't talk about Black Lives Matter. We need to talk about the class struggle, because it's class that unites all oppressed groups. And I do believe, and I'm not arguing with them when they say that. That is true. But the fact of the matter is when we talk about the plight of Native Americans, the justice that Native Americans need is completely different from, say, a white working class person that hasn't gotten a raise in over a decade. And it's important, and it is important that Black people get their minimum wage risen up if they're working at McDonald's. But you have Black people who even when they had all those working class jobs weren't even paid the same as their white working class male comrades. And then you want to talk about gender. I mean, you have women who across the board, no matter what industry, white collar, blue collar, who are not paid the same as men. And then, when you talk about the plight of queer people, you have queer people who are marginalized, not really because of, not really because they're a poor queer person, but they're marginalized because they just have a different sexual orientation or different gender identity that they want addressed. So sometimes when I hear a lot of white socialists, white Marxists talk about how they're tired of hearing about identity politics and stuff like that, it's like I know where they're coming from, but at the same time, the fact that sometimes they're so aggressive in pushing back against Native Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, or the plight of trans people, it makes me think sometimes like, I don't, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And this is not a new problem. Malcolm X once again talked about them white liberals. Be careful of them white liberals. Always wanted to change the subject, and they talked about how a white person living in a trailer park still feels he's better than a Black person. Still looks at himself on the higher on the totem pole than even a rich Black person. We got even studies talk about how there's a white person without a degree will get hired over a Black person with a degree. So there's definitely race. You can't erase race, no matter your socioeconomic status. I know a lot of rich Black people, sometimes they want to think they've transcended their Black status, but they get their wake up call a lot of times. They Tiger Woods talked about he's cobbling Asian, but the news treats him like he's Black. So people got to understand you can't escape your Blackness no matter how hard you try. The white Marxists, the white liberals, the white whatever they want to call themselves, the white progressives, if they don't want to talk about anti-Blackness and getting rid of white supremacy, then they're not really your friends. They're not really the allies they portray themselves to be. So that's why, we can fight with them on the issues that we agree with. We can fight for universal health care and raise the minimum wage and clean energy and a lot of the issues we align with. But once they start questioning whether they want to remove white supremacy from the police force, then you're like, hold on, we gotta separate. Let's focus on those issues that we can agree with, and we definitely
Well,
not going to talk about this.
In fact, some of my comrades are against they're fine with taking down the Confederate statues, but they don't want to. But once you talk about George Washington, or once you bring up Abraham Lincoln and the fact that he wanted an all-white country and wanted to actually deport black people, and the fact that that's okay, he wants to end slavery for black people, but when it came to Native Americans and Mexicans, oh boy, he was another one of those founding fathers who Glenn Ford of Black Agenda Report called those miserable sons of a bitches who were who were all rival white supremacists and rival oligarchs against the British empire.
Yeah, sometimes you need to test your so-called white allies by asking them questions about that. Like, how do you feel about reparations? What do you think should happen to the killer of Tamir Rice? What do you think should happen to the killer of Eric Garner? Well, what do you think should black people have more access to business loans? Should black people be allowed to have their own schools, independent schools? Should they be allowed to wear locks, braids? Sometimes you just got to ask these qualifying questions to see how on point they really are, how respective of black people and black culture they really are, or they just want to fight against the N-word and all this other symbolic mess. They care more about turning down statues than making sure your family can eat. They want to. Do they really want you to be able to be free and self-determined, or do they just want to appear like they're respecting you, but not really respecting you? So we definitely got to be very careful in who we align ourselves with, and know when to align ourselves and when to separate, and just be okay that we can do this by ourselves. John Henrik Clarke says we have no friends. So be careful with for the need for friends and allies. So you really, we're powerful enough on our own, and if we just focus and unite and realize that how powerful and confident we are, and how powerful we are if we use our power the right way. Stop throwing away our vote. Stop voting against our own interests. Stop using our money against our own interests, and use our money to actually build the institutions that we need. Then we can definitely go far. We just haven't done that yet. But what I am maybe surprisingly optimistic, because there is a growing interest in black wealth. There's all these sorts of podcasts and shows like the Earn Your Leisure podcast, the Black Wealth Renaissance podcast. There's a podcast called Social Proof that talks about entrepreneurship. They let Claude Anderson on The Breakfast Club, which is a popular show, and he was able to get his message out of talking about how you got to really focus. Black people got to focus and stop being called minority, and be proud to be called black, and don't let them call you people of color. Be proud to say you're black and focus on the black issues. And he talked about the levels of focus on your economics, then your politics, then your cops, then your media, then your schools. He said, build up your own institutions, build up your own platforms, so you can be as self-determined, as independent as possible. So there is a growing, there's just a growing respect and appreciation for these pro-black institutions. There's the black media is growing, and then the white establishment is going hard to try to stifle it. But we're going to see if we can survive and thrive through all the attempts to take us down. We've been quite prosperous before. We've overcome before. We can overcome again.
Well, I just hope, I just hope in closing, I'm all about, people power to the people, and, the people united will never be defeated. And certainly, I take inspiration, I take inspiration a lot in Latin America, where you do have all of these where you do have a caste system that exists there, where a lot of times indigenous people are living under apartheid, similar to South Africa. And of course you have those of European descent, and of course you have then black communities there and biracial communities there, and they all know the game, and they know that they have to fight against the white supremacy and the ongoing unjust system of capitalism, which are two sides of the same coin, and that whole "the people united will never be defeated." I only wish that the West, and I am really specifically talking about the West, that the West was, like that. But I remember, once watching a speech of Glenn Ford where he said that, for decades, we actually have been trying to say to our white, comrades to listen to our plight, and we have, a platform that they can get behind, and they've continuously, shown us, the door and whatnot. So, but there is, but I like that you think that there is some hope, and I'll just say, hey, if you ever do start a kind of a solidarity group with with Indigenous people, let me know. I will gladly come move to the U.S. and be involved in that. Should that ever happen? Should that ever happen?
Got it.
Alrighty. Well, on that, I think that's probably a good place to end. So we were joined on this edition of 1+1 with Troy Moten, who is a journalist. He is an activist. He is a community leader. He is a businessman. He is an educator. And we are joined on this edition of 1+1 with him. He's also a contributor to Your World News, where journalism and activism is not mutually exclusive. Troy, thank you so much for coming on the program today. It was very, very enlightening, and I hope that this will be the first of many conversations, and hopefully the moment the coronavirus buggers off, I can come visit you and Solomon and the group in the U.S.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you.
Looking forward to having you back, and best of luck to everything, and power to the people, death to white supremacy.
Yes, indeed.